Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a live webinar, which will introduce the ASCM digital capabilities model to the classroom. We have two great subject matter experts today. We'll save questions to the end. The chat will be open, but I will be monitoring them. I am also going to make sure everyone is muted. And I'm just going to make sure that we have Morgan and Chris unmuted. All right. Thank you very much. Today we have Morgan Swink and Chris Richard. They're going to be going over the content of today's webinar. I'm going to let each of them give an introduction of themselves, but I'm the Senior Research Manager at ASCM. So I'm sort of the radio engineer for the day. And Morgan and Chris will be running the show. So take it away.
Thanks, Matt. Well, good morning, everybody, or evening or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us. I see some familiar faces and names out there. Good to see all you guys, and thanks again for joining us. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Morgan Swink. I'm a professor at TCU. I hold a research chair here, and then I also have the pleasure of leading our Center for Supply Chain Innovation. And that's a really great opportunity for our school to connect with different business partners and do other kinds of research projects. And in that role, I became involved with Deloitte and ASCM on a number of different projects, and one of which we're going to talk to you about today. But I'll ask Chris Richard. Chris is with us from Deloitte today. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself just to get things going here.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. As stated already, my name's Chris Richard. I work in our Deloitte and our supply chain practice, and have been, I guess, working in supply chain since the early 90s. It's been actually most of my time in the semiconductor industry. I've worked in the industry since 1992. Yeah, as Morgan said, and we'll get into a little bit more of the history here in a minute, but for years I've thought that the kind of traditional linear way of thinking about supply chains, supply networks was a bit limited, which is how we started to work with ASCM on this, and that's how Morgan and I started to work together.
Great, thanks, Chris. So again, we've got some things to share with you. Maybe some of you have heard of the digital capabilities model already. I'll talk a little bit about how I got involved with it and this larger idea of trying to integrate digital transformation, digital technology into some classes that I've been teaching, and a specific class in particular. And then Chris can tell us more about the DCM, the evolution of the model, and the work that Deloitte and ASCM have been doing to build this, and been a number of academics involved in the process as well that we'll talk about a little bit. And then I do have some examples. I have a course example that we can talk through briefly. I'll just kind of show you how I structured a course using that model as the kind of organizing framework for it. And there's a lot of materials that came out of that effort that we're happy to share with you. And we've got a couple of websites we can show and some things like that. We do want to leave some time at the end for questions and answers, of course, but also any kind of ideas or thoughts you might want to share. But do feel free along the way here to enter thoughts or questions into the chat box, and we'll try to address those as we go or at the end. Hopefully this can be a kind of a working session that's helpful for everybody. We'd love to share other materials. If you have those kind of links to articles or things that you think would be useful, feel free to throw those into the chat box as well.
Yeah, and Morgan, we're happy to be interrupted, right? We're happy to take questions as we go, right?
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand, or there's a lot of folks on here. We're happy to see everybody joining. I don't know if I'll see your hand, but do feel free to jump in if you need to.
It will be my job to keep a sharp eye on anyone who wants to interact.
Thank you, Matt.
All right.
Yeah, you bet.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Okay, well, let's get going. So what's the whole objective here, the big picture? I mean, we're all aware, of course, of the major transformations in processes of all kinds, but particularly in supply chain, up and down the supply chain, and how technology has been changing these processes for decades. But it kind of seems like we're at an inflection point, or have been for a number of years, where lots of companies are making more and more serious investments into digital technologies. And certainly COVID, the pandemic has accelerated that, if anything. So what do we do as academics, to respond to and integrate and embrace, this change that's going on out there in the real world? Well, I think, as I thought about this for my own students, and I teach mainly graduate students, so a lot of this conversation is really from my perspective about what we're doing with the MBA program and our Master of Science in Supply Chain and particular courses in that structure. But we wanted to at least give these grad students, some understanding of what's happening out there, what different types of technology solutions exist, and how they're changing different types of processes. And, in addition to some facility with what is happening in some specific types of technologies, more importantly, probably is to give them a big picture idea. How do I, if I see some type of opportunity or solution as a manager, how do I fit that into a larger framework of what it can do for me and what we can do to the company to change performance? And capabilities really seems to be a great way of thinking about these technological opportunities, rather than focusing so much on the specific big data or other, automation or other aspects. To define things in terms of capabilities helps to cut through the noise of all these different technology solutions that a lot of managers are inundated with from consultants just about every day. So we want to give them that big picture view, some facility with the terminology. There's a lot of acronyms and terminology out there, of course. Very much a focus on the opportunities and the capabilities and ways to think about not just solving problems with technology, but actually strategically thinking about technology. And I think there's a big distinction to be made there. And we really can't talk about any of this without talking about change management. A lot of I've done some research in this area, and almost all the executives we talk to say the same thing. It's not really the technology that's the problem, it's the change management that's the problem. It's the organizational barriers, it's the lack of talent, it's the integration issues. Those are really the challenges. So these are the kind of overall learning objectives that we are seeking to integrate into multiple courses. And then at TCU, we have a specific tools and technologies, supply chain tools and technologies course that we've redesigned using this approach and this framework. So this is where the idea of digital supply networks and the digital capabilities model kind of enters the picture here. Some of this is serendipitous and some of it is more intentional, but we've been kind of looking around for different frameworks. And, Gartner has some frameworks. There are other providers of some frameworks. I don't really remember how I got involved originally, Chris, but through some mutual contacts, and I think Deloitte reached out to me, actually. Mark Codlier might have.
Yeah.
But they've been working with ASCM for a number of years on this digital capabilities model, and it just made a lot of sense to me. I got involved early on in terms of giving some feedback, myself and a few other academics, and academics have been consulted along the way here. And I'm going to let Chris describe the model in more detail, but just the big picture you see here on the slide, it's organized around kind of a matrix view. There's the digital disciplines that span all capabilities. And then there are these 6 capability areas that then are subdivided into smaller capabilities. And there's a lot of great supporting information. I'll show you some of this later that Deloitte has developed around this model. So Chris, tell us a little bit more about how the model originated and what it's all about and where you're going with it.
Sure. Yeah, and maybe we'll go a little bit off script here. After I kind of give a little bit of the background map, maybe I'll share my screen and just do a little bit of a walkthrough to get more of a dynamic view compared to the image we've got here, if that's So Matt, if you can make sure I'm able to present here in a couple minutes, be good.
Yeah, you should be co-host already.
Okay, okay, thanks. So yeah, just kind of rewind, go back in history a bit here, right? The SCOR model was introduced to the world in the kind of mid 90s, and I think it was really great, really powerful, right, for the supply chain profession. It provided all of a sudden this organizing framework for companies to think about, how should I structure my supply chain? How should I measure my performance, right? How should I map my processes? How should I, drive improvement around those? And, so really great framework. And at the time I was just out of grad school, and I was working at Intel Corporation, and I got pulled into a kind of corporate, supply chain and manufacturing task force, where we were really going to take a look at our end-to-end supply chain, through the lens of SCOR. And I remember showing up in the very first meeting, and big conference room, a lot of people in there. And they said, okay, this is the SCOR model. It's got plan, source, make, deliver. And so we're going to have 4 teams: plan, source, make, deliver. And I raised my hand and I said, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, because that's how we're already organized. We've got a planning organization, we've got a sourcing and procurement organization, we have a manufacturing organization, we have a worldwide logistics organization. Why would we just that doesn't seem like a supply chain. That seems like 4 supply functions. Why don't we take a look at the end to end? Why don't we take a look from the customer, right? For perspective, why don't we look at it by product line, what have you? So long time ago, so this was in 1997 or 98, I appreciated SCOR, but I also thought, there were opportunities to do more. And then, fast forward many years after that, when I come to Deloitte, after I'd worked in industry for 15 years, and then I started, consulting in supply chain profession. And at Deloitte, we were working on this concept of a digital supply network. And as I thought about, this is kind of the opportunity here to break out those paradigms that frustrated me, some 20 years ago, and reinvent the future here. And so as we looked at the network here, we said, what is different about a network? How would we model it? How would we display it? And that's kind of what's brought us to this point. We're going to show a compare and contrast of kind of the SCOR versus DCM in a little bit here. But the final thing I'll say, and I'll just share my screen now, Matt. One second. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay. Yeah, so for those of you that haven't seen it before, if you're an ASCM member, you can just log in. But what we sought to do is build a network view of capabilities. So we have 6 what we call level 1s: connected customer, product development, synchronized planning, supply, and fulfillment. And for each of these level 1s, you've got information here. You've got a capability map. You've got various personas that really take a look at, before I have this capability, what's my life like? After I have this capability, how does it change? So if you haven't seen it there. And then, what we have in each of our level 1s here are, around, 5 to 7 level 2s underneath these. And what we've done in the model is connect, show how the level 2s connect to others. So if you mouse over these or click on it, you'll get a description of that interaction. Down here you see a key on how frequently and what's the level of interdependence. And then back up here, we've also mapped what's an output from a capability view, which we're seeing now, versus what's an input. So underneath this, and just connecting back to something Morgan said, there's I can't remember if we have 38 or 39 level 2s right now, but let's say it's 39. There's a 39 by 39 matrix in here times and that maps all these relationships. So that's what lies underneath here. So just want to do a quick kind of overview of that, and Morgan, we can flip back to the main presentation now.
Okay. So Chris, do you want to say a little more about the differences between DCM and SCOR, or?
Yeah, sure. Can we go to that table view? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This is what I was referring to earlier. So as I really started to think, this is probably 6 years ago now, so about, well, what everyone in the world's talking about, digital supply networks, network, right? Well, what's really, different about it? And so we've tried to kind of capture the key points of that here. So with if I just move to the second row there, organizing structure, the SCOR model, and this, I think it's one of the reasons why SCOR model has been really useful and comfortable for people, is it has this hierarchical decomposition. I've got my level 1s, level 2, level 3, level 4. Now, of course, SCOR only goes to a certain level, and then the users are left to their own devices to take things beyond there. But again, back to the story I told about when I first started looking at SCOR, what I was looking for is, how does the supply chain really interact with each other? What, if I'm in planning, what are the groups of manufacturing I need to work with, and how do I work with supplier management, for example? So our paradigm in our DCM model is relational. How do these capabilities relate to each other? And if you go to the website, we have a couple of these, what we call digital chords, that where we attempt to articulate how the different capabilities work in concert with each other. In terms of the model definition, I mean, SCOR is really a process model, and as Morgan said, as he was talking about the using this for the course, it's really about capability. It's like, what do I need? What does it provide me? How are things different now in the, and going forward than they were in the past? So it's all about that. We actually have now built a very detailed process model underneath this, but it's not out on the website. ASCM is forming a working group right now, actually, to figure out how do we put DCM and SCOR together, most effectively, so that they really seamlessly, interoperate. So I'll just make a plug on ASCM's behalf that starting in we're planning to have the first working group meeting at the conference in October, but they will be looking for working group members to to jump in here, so we can collaborate on integrating the two. The next row here, back to the matrix, end-to-end orientation. So again, SCOR is very, I have this transaction, I move it to this stage, I move it to the next stage. And in a network, it's really around concurrent collaboration. You're kind of constantly sensing, you're constantly responding. So much more of a real-time interactive across the network, which is how companies work. And so this is an improvement. That kind of feeds into the next point on control systems. SCOR is very much an input, process, output kind of model. And as I really think about a network, and from my my days as in control systems engineering, it's really about a process variable, right? I have to sense what's going on. As an organization, I have to collaborate based off of what I'm sensing to come up with some kind of optimal plan, and then I respond, right? So I've got it's more of a continuous loop, closed loop, feedback system is the paradigm we've got here. And then finally, in terms of technology, SCOR has always been independent of technology, right? And when it was originally formed decades ago, the concept was, well, define the process and then we'll make the technology do our work for us, right? Or implement that process. And as we've all learned over these decades, that promise of technology from the 90s, it just isn't here, right? And we're often limited by what technologies can do, but more and more, we're in this incredible age now where technologies are enabling things that we could never do before. And so that's a big difference with DCM, and we'll be publishing this fall, is the technology enablement layer under the model we have out there. So that's a little bit of the history and the compare and contrast.
Thanks, Chris. So with that as kind of an overview, I'll take a few minutes now to just talk about the course that I developed around this for TCU and some of the supporting materials, and maybe we can have some time for discussion. And as I mentioned, a number of academics have been involved along the way in terms of the development of the DCM, and also given me feedback on the course. I noticed I had time to look while Chris was talking. I see John Gray out there, and Mark Barrett, and Ed Bernardes. You guys have all had, I think, the touch points along the way involved. Maybe some others of you that I'm not catching, but some of them have joined here. And if we have time, maybe you guys can give us your perspective on how the model is developed and where we want to go next with it. But essentially, I developed this. It's a graduate course around the core being these 6, level 1 capabilities that we drill down into, with basically a front end and a back end. And the front end is more about what's happening more generally, introducing students to the idea of transformation, digitally enabled transformation, and the challenges with managing that transformation. And I have a couple of my own frameworks that Nada Sanders and I have put together that I'll share along the way there to kind of set the stage for this more specific digital capabilities model. So then that's a couple of classes, and then we go down and we drill down into these different level 1s. And for each one of these, again, this is a graduate level course, I was able to find a speaker from someone, a lot of solution provider firms, like Blue Yonder or Esri or those kinds of firms, and some other actual people who are in practice trying to implement some of these things now. And it was really helpful to, and again, this was all over Zoom. We did this last fall, so a year ago fall, and it worked out really, really well. So I encourage you, if you're thinking about a class like this, everything you can do to bring a real world example or someone to come talk about what they're doing just really adds a lot of richness to the discussion. And then, excuse me, to wrap the course up, this was really kind of a fun thing. I invited the students to go and find, something, and I showed them the Gartner hype cycle and some other sources like that, but just to go find some really cutting edge technologies like nanobots or something like that out there in the future, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and just have a whole class around that, just discussing what might the future look like. And that was really a lot of fun, as well as, I hope, informative for the class. So that's the overall structure. I won't spend too much time. I've got a slide for each one of those. I won't spend too much time on that because I want to save time for discussion. But and I will, again, I'll show you at the end. On a website, we've posted these the slides for the course, and also a lot of the supporting materials. I'll give you a glimpse of that in a minute. But just in the introduction, I love this chart. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's Moore's law, but extended back over 100 years, where you're starting with things like the abacus, and how processing technology has followed that, doubling every 16 months or whatever Moore's law is, even before we started to talk about silicon and chips and things like that. But it really highlights, and you can bring in some great examples of how processing speed has obviously improved, but the cost of processing and the cost of storage has just incredibly, reduced over the last 30 years, particularly. And so that has driven a lot of this digital transformation, not just in terms of computers, but sensors of all kinds, and other kinds of technologies as well. So I think it's a really great place to start. This graph talks about digitalization and the fact that COVID has actually accelerated that. I mentioned that earlier. So it is a very relevant topic, especially today. And you can even bring in all the current pressures on labor and all those kinds of things that are really, again, accelerating moves toward automation and more generally digitalization. And then I introduced the idea of digital supply networks. And again, there's a lot of great information on the website that Chris kind of gave you a big picture of. and different categories of technology. So as I mentioned, Nada Sanders and I have published a couple of papers in Supply Chain Management Review. The first one just really kind of sets what's the landscape today, what are the different types of technology. We've got 4 types of technologies. I know this is a very small diagram here, but just setting the stage and defining things. And then there's another paper that digs down a little bit more into what do we mean by capabilities. And that's this next kind of 2x2 matrix here that we've developed in the second paper. So I use those papers to and some others to kick off this, define the space and then talk about the challenge and some of the transformational management issues. Then we just get right into the 6 level 1 capabilities. And for each one, it's pretty much the same kind of learning objectives. I want them to get a sense of what the capability, what it entails, what the supporting level 2 capabilities are. There are even lower level capabilities, I'm told, but we don't go that far. And it's still an evolving model. And then just try to get the students to understand how these capabilities could impact processes. And the processes are similar to SCOR in that they're arranged around, supply, managing fulfillment, managing planning. The differences to me in terms of the process definitions are this one, the connected customer. There's a lot more focus here on the interaction, engagement, direct engagement of customers into the process. And I guess it varies depending on the nature of the product or the service, of course, but that's a really interesting area that I think had a lot of overlap with marketing and sales, but it's really relevant for students to understand. And then the other one that is different, I would say, is digital development. And again, similarly, we in supply chain don't often, in my opinion, often enough, kind of bring in the developmental aspects, new product development or new service development, or even R&D more broadly as a part of the supply chain. And so I love that aspect of the DCM, that it really emphasizes the role and the interactions that need to take place between the development process and the delivery process. And again, it varies tremendously depending on whether you're talking about an engineer to order or make to order type of or assembly to order, some type of process. But it's a great way to talk about that, and especially in this module, the idea of platforms is so powerful. And of course, we hear about it all the time in terms of online platforms, but platforms, whether they're fully digital or material, the idea of platforms is just such an important concept that I think students need to understand, and the capabilities around that. Supply, again, technologies, this is more familiar, but a lot of great applications and a lot of AI types of applications on the supply side that you can talk about, especially in planning, of course, forecasting and planning and all that. There's a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence applications. So for each one of these, we have pretty much the same kinds of objectives. And then I try to highlight a couple of core concepts that usually are buzzword type concepts. Concurrent planning is a hot one, digital twin, control towers. Students need to know what these mean, what they essentially represent. And then I pick 2 or 3 technologies to make sure that we highlight. I mentioned we had a guest speaker for each one of these. I also tried to find a case for each one of these 6. And again, I'll show those to you in a minute. Most of them are Harvard or Ivy type cases. Some of them fit better than others, but I try to pick cases that illustrate at least one of the highlighted technologies in each of the areas. Smart operations, so that's, again, could be within a manufacturing setting. Smart factory was this moniker was a smart factory for a while. Or it could be in a service operations setting. A lot of automation there, of course. Dynamic fulfillment. Here we're focusing. I focused a lot on warehouse and transportation automation, and of course we've got Amazon and other stories to motivate that topic. So, as that's essentially the process that we went through. Now, this course was an 8-week course. So we were covering, one topic every night for 4 hours, but I could easily see how you could expand this into a full semester course. So we just barely had time to touch the surface in most of these areas. And I would also encourage you, if you're thinking about a course like this, try to get the students as engaged as possible. There's so much great information out there, on the web and other sources. And you want, obviously, to be as up to date. That's going to be the challenge, I think, with teaching this kind of course is keeping it up to date. And so that's too much work for the professor to do. So it's better to ask the students to go out there and dig and find, So I had several different venues for that. A couple of team assignments where they would go and research the technology. And then we had a couple of discussion forums that were just always being updated. And of course, they were incentivized to post to those discussion forums articles and illustrations of the topics that we were talking about as we went through. And I found that to be very useful in keeping things kind of up to date. So I mentioned the materials. Let me show you, I can show you this web page. Well, first, let me say the web page that Chris showed, there's a ton of great information there. Students, you have to be a member to be able to access at least the lower level sites. For faculty, I think it's $70, something like that, to join ASCM. For students, it's free. So
That's correct.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I encourage you to use that website. I also have at this materials website a slide deck that Deloitte developed that has a lot of that same material in it's a PDF, but it's slide form, PowerPoint form. And I basically used that as the textbook for my course, with a bunch of articles and online articles. But that was the core reading that they had to do, because each capability has probably 20 or 30 slides with it. Again, Chris mentioned you've got not just the definitions, but illustrations and a persona, how it changed, the process in this person's life. It's really, really great. So a lot of good information there. Let me just show you, I've got the website pulled up here, I believe. Are you seeing this now, this website? Yeah. So if you go to this website, again, it's in the slide deck, and we'll make that available to you guys. You've got the course outline that I just showed you and a bunch of other supporting slides. I'm not sure what the DCM materials list. Oh, okay. Yes. Let me show you that real quick. That's important. So we went through, through the process of getting my students to dig into this and my own kind of digging around. I found a ton of related articles. I think I've already got this pulled up, actually. There we go. Get it to the right page here. There we go. Are you seeing this Word file now? Okay. So again, you can get this from the website, but for each one of those modules in the course, I've got a number of cases, a bunch of articles. Some of them are online, some of them are in journals, but mostly all available. And videos, right? So for synchronized planning, here are some of the cases. I used this positive plans and pandemics, as well as Bloom and Grow Asia. I use those too. But there's some other ones you might look at. Some videos that illustrate some L2s, lower level 2 capabilities within synchronized planning. And then for each L2, I found articles and videos. So there's just a ton of sources here, probably too many for you to sort through. The challenge is, of course, this was all a year ago, so a lot of these may be kind of old hat or out of date here. But anyway, that's available if you want to check that out. And then I've got the syllabus from my course, the overall description I mentioned, the PDF file, and some quiz questions. So I developed a number of quiz questions for each module that you're free to use. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, kind of the overview of what we've been working on, both collectively and independently. in terms of developing this overall model and applying it in a classroom setting. Would love to hear from you folks. Are there any, I'm looking at the chat, and are there any questions out there, or if you have other ideas or resources you'd like to point out for the group, let us know.
Yeah, there were a couple easy ones that I was able to answer in the chat, such as how your students could get access. All student membership is free. If they just go to the membership page, they'll have to select core, and then you'll select from a list of options. If they select student, that should give them access to the DCM. And an academic membership is $75, and that should give you access to the full model. Some of the other not so easy to answer questions that are from Morgan and Chris, and I'll just go in order in which they popped up in the chat. The first one was the course pedagogy. Was that case-based? I was wondering if we have cases on these topics.
Yeah, so again, this was graduate level, and I'm a case teacher anyway. I don't like to lecture that much, but that was the big challenge, honestly. And as I showed you that list, and so for each one of the level 1 capabilities, that's the 6 areas plus the kind of front end and back end, I did find a number of cases, 3 or 4 cases. I was restricting my search, though, basically to Harvard and Ivy, because those are the kinds of cases that typically we use at TCU in the graduate courses. There might be other sources out there that could give you some better ones. It was really hit or miss. A couple of them really hit like there's a great couple of cases on Siemens and how they've, developed a new strategy around CAD/CAM, what we used to call CAD/CAM, and integrated manufacturing and all that. Great for the smart factory, and it really tied nicely with the digital development capability. Some of the others I had, it was more of a stretch, but you can find those cases on that list. Great question.
Can I jump in on that?
Sure.
And actually, let me share my screen again.
Yeah, let me
So
start sharing.
one of the things that this will be a call for input for anyone that has ideas, we can follow up offline, but one of the things we're trying to do here to illustrate, how you use these capabilities is these digital cords. So if you go there, you'll see that we've got 2, and these are kind of prototypes, right? We're not, we're trying to figure out, is this a good way to communicate? But it's kind of a mini case here, right? Where we talk about, okay, what's the problem? And these are actually based off of real client situations, but this company basically had capacity constraints. So how do we tackle it? This is what we did. And then in terms of this concept of the cord is, it's kind of the sequence of how we tackle it. So, gathering information off the tools, using this analytics to respond to those signals, rescheduling based off of that, et cetera, et cetera. So we have these digital cords, which is another way to maybe think about, cases. We're actually meeting with a major retailer next week to see if we can put one out on how they actually responded to the COVID situation using digital technology. So these are kind of disguised here. So if anyone has ideas on the concepts of using the digital cords as a way to illustrate how these nodes in the network capabilities interoperate with each other, or that's another lens to kind of look at cases through, and we'd love to get any feedback you might have on that.
Going in order of the questions, it looks like John Gray is asking if there are speakers on this topic. And I don't know, Morgan, if he means you and Chris.
Well, hey, John, do you mean for each of the capability areas? As I mentioned, I reached out just through our own networks and found some speakers that again, this is my advantage with the center. We do a lot of interaction with different companies. Is that what you were asking, John? Or
I need to unmute John, and I don't know if any of you have the ability to ask me for an unmute. Find you on the list. Hey, John, you should have had an unmute.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And I put it in the chat as well. I was actually thinking of companies or service providers or people that were particularly good at talking. Ideally, so I've had Coupa come in. I've had some of these service providers, but those end up being a little bit of an advertisement for them.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a little bit more of intelligent supply, as it just happens to be what I teach. That's the one I'm interested in most. Is there people that have maybe used AI in procurement successfully, or if you have any of those speakers? I haven't been able to find any of those.
I mean, what I
Yeah.
could offer, Morgan, is, John, I don't know if we've met, but I can connect you with our guy that leads intelligent supply, and we can ask if there's any clients that would be interested and willing, to speak. So I can offer that. From my work, we've got some clients that want to keep this all secret and proprietary, and we've got others that are more open. So I'd certainly be happy to see if we could help.
Yeah, I should say Deloitte has made a huge commitment to this effort, and they have subject matter experts on each of these capability areas. And I've had the chance to interact with a bunch of them, and it's been really great. So they are a great resource.
Okay, Matt, if you can get me John's email, then I'll follow up with him.
Yeah, I'll connect you two after this meeting. There's one more in the chat, but after I ask this one in the chat, if you use the raise your hand function and you want to ask without using me as a proxy, I'm happy to send an unmute request. But this one is, what are the course prerequisites for the graduate students to take this course?
Yeah, so again, these are MBA students and Masters of Science students. The only prerequisite is the fundamentals course. So we have a intro to supply chain, basically, course that everyone has to take before they would take any of these second level kind of courses. So I saw Ben Lawson raise his hand, but I don't want to hear from Ben. So just kidding. Ben, did you have a question?
And Ben, I should have sent you
If you can unmute him. Yeah, you can probably just unmute everybody.
Yeah, so I'm just going to unmute all. Let's see if I could do that. And then, you could just mute yourselves and then unmute or as you want to speak. Let me try and find Ben in here.
Ben's joining us all the way from Cambridge. So what time is it there? Oh, it's not too late, but thanks for joining us.
Well, while we get that sorted out, there's another question. Oh, you're live. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We just got a new dog yesterday, so I was just running around after that. I just had a question that obviously digitalization is one of the key trends that we've been talking about, but the other big trend, of course, is sustainability. And I'm just interested, Morgan or others, have you had the opportunity to tailor the discussion around DCM in with the sustainability link with procurement and supply?
Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, I can answer that. So there's nothing that we've done so far that is kind of ready for prime time. But Ben, I mean, we get the same thing. I think, Matt, I think it's fair to say that sustainability is one of ASCM's top 3 strategic priorities, for the next couple of years. So we actually have a group right now within Deloitte that is looking at the whole DCM model and looking at, does it make sense, say, to do an overlay for sustainability? So we're looking at that right now, but it's very early days. If you have thoughts on that, ideas, we'd love to talk to you and see where your head is. You're on mute, Ben. We can't hear you.
Yeah. I sent you
there
another.
Sorry, Chris. My iPad's about to die as well. It's all going wrong on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, great. Thank you. I think we've been in touch already. I think I have your email address. So
yeah, we have. I remember.
Thoughts on that? I'll get in touch.
Video. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
We have another question in the chat. Was the typical case discussion worked better or few hands-on for some topics, or worked better for this course? My experience for
Mhm.
supply chain modeling and analytics, hands-on based cases of HBS or Ivy worked.
Yeah. So again, this course, at least the course I designed, was very much managerial, implementation oriented. We didn't like I did not ask them to code something or even to use some of the there's a lot of I understand, at least I haven't checked them out myself, but I've heard there's a lot of great online tools that you could use to design a bot or something like that. So we didn't get into that level. I didn't ask them to do a lot of hands-on stuff. I would love to have. I mean, if I had more time, maybe we could get into that. Usually, again, this is graduate level, and they all have work experience. So a lot of them, or some of them, are almost subject matter experts in some of these different areas. So I depended heavily on their relevant experiences, but it wasn't. We didn't do any modeling or analytics in this course. And again, that might be a glaring omission here. We don't see big data analytics here very much, but we have a whole other set of courses, and actually a Master of Science in business analytics that kind of covers the more technical aspects of that.
Another question in the chat, and now participants can unmute themselves for the Q&A, but this next one in the chat: is there any scope for students to implement and experience a simple idea or concept about the learnings in any digital platform?
Not quite sure how to answer that. I think I know what you're asking about. I did not search in that. If anybody knows a great platform out there that could be used, the thing that jumps to mind here is planning, the synchronized planning one. There are clearly there's some simulations or games. Harvard's got one. There's some others, something fresh, I can't remember. I mean, maybe you could integrate that into the course as a platform for illustrating planning. One of the companies, I'm sure they'd be happy for me to mention, that I worked with a lot and who helped me with this course, is Kinaxis. And they're one of the leading solution providers for kind of S&OP type planning solutions. And they're working on something like that. I'm encouraging them to do, to create a simulation of that sort for classes. But I didn't have time in this course to integrate anything like that. But I think it'd be a great idea. If some of you have other ideas, you want to list them in the chat or something, some other platforms that you've had success with. I hope that's what you were asking about.
Next up in the chat, it's a comment. Two thoughts. The course is described having from a stronger digital capabilities perspective for students used to the SCOR model. From our concepts class, making the transition is key. Second, I think it may help to clearly link the relevant technologies to the capabilities.
I should say that's Sriram, who is
yes,
in fact
yes,
a colleague of mine. Yeah, Sriram.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he taught this course. He teaches this course normally. I just filled in for him last year while he was on sabbatical.
And it was a
So,
great transformation. So this is a great digital transformation in practice there.
Yeah, but hey, any other thoughts you have to share on that? I mean, you're about to teach it, or you maybe started it, right?
So I started last week. So I kind of took where you had developed it and just modified a little bit, changed a couple of cases on it. And so last week when I was introducing the class, everybody at TCU, we have a supply chain concepts class, which is like an introduction to supply chain. And then this course that Morgan is talking about is an elective. It's on tools and technologies. So last week when I introduced this idea and this whole digital capability network and the model to them, I think there was a gap in the sense they needed to see why a traditional plan source make deliver return. That model is incomplete in many ways. I think Richard, you were getting to that, or Chris, you were getting to that.
Yep.
I think that transition needs to be motivated further, and I think any resource, maybe the digital cards or the examples that you have on the website, that might do a great job of setting the stage, and that is something that I think we need extra time. I mean, this is just my experience the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
And the second piece, I think, Morgan or Chris, I mean, I'd like to get your feedback as well. Now, traditionally, at least this course, maybe this is particular to TCU, we've always talked about introducing supply chain students to these emerging tech, big data to blockchain to AI and all that. So there's been a heavy technology orientation rather than a capability perspective, which is, I think, great now that we're talking about capabilities. But I think there's still some interest. So when I talked about these ideas in class, it seemed like the students were able to relate to these technologies. When I say blockchain, yes, a lot of lights went up. We talk about AI, they can all relate to that. But then now when we talk about these individual capabilities, connected customer, intelligent supply, or I want to be able to kind of tell them, look, these are the 3 or 4 types of technology categories that fall into this. And then you say, this is how this capability becomes possible. And so I think that connection, I think, would do a lot of benefit, because then they'll see the actual practical side of it, the application side of it. And then they see, so in fact, I think that was kind of the idea. I said, look, there's technologies, there's capability, and then there's an implementation. You got to think about those 3 pieces. And I think to the extent that we can emphasize that, that'll be great.
Shriram, did you say you're teaching a course on the technologies right now, as we speak?
Yes. This is the same course that Morgan developed, and I'm kind of
Shriram's at TCU also.
Yeah, I'm at TCU too.
Got it.
With Morgan, yes.
Well, I'd like to say a couple things. So one, very tactically and near term, since you're already going in the course, if you wanted us, we could set up a meeting to show you where we're going with this technology mapping. So we could do that, next week if you want to kind of intercept what you're doing. Second, and I had mentioned this before, in the fall, probably at the conference, that's the target, if not shortly thereafter, we will unveil in the model itself, right, the technology mappings. Now, one of the things I'll just share with this group that we were kind of wrestling with a little bit is, we're trying to balance. We don't want to advertise certain technologies or companies, right? We don't want people to come to the website and say, "Oh, I ought to use Kinaxis or Blue Yonder," like Morgan used both of those examples. So we're struggling a little bit to kind of get it represented in a way that is agnostic of particular vendors. But that is coming for sure. And then back on the work, the putting SCOR and DCM together, I thought it'd be helpful just to give a little bit of background here too. That I didn't share earlier, one of the things that really sprung this, I mentioned kind of my personal journey into it, but there was a parallel journey with ASCM's working group with its members, and the members were saying, we don't know what digital is, we don't know what to do, like how is SCOR supposed to help us, like what like this is our most frequently asked question from management, how are we supposed to respond? That prompted DCM, and the view at ASCM at the time was that, basically SCOR needs to sunset and we need to replace it. Now, in the subsequent years, there was some research and market research where, they said, well, gosh, that's stupid, because SCOR has such a brand and such a reputation that we can't do that. So the strategy has changed from sunset SCOR and replace it with DCM, where we would have kind of put it all together, to this concept of interoperability. So just giving you a little bit of the thorniness of the background there, but but we will be trying to figure that out over the next 18 months and get it locked.
Thank you. That'll be great.
Give you a little more background.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left, so if anyone wants to unmute themselves in the waning minutes and ask Morgan and Chris a question.
So while we're waiting for that last question or two, 2 other things I wanted to point out, kind of next steps. continuing to work with Deloitte, and I think they're open to other folks who would love to kind of join the project on refining the model. And these L2 interactions, the level 2 capability interactions that Chris illustrated with the digital chords and all that. And there's a lot of really meaty, interesting issues in there that could actually drive some research questions. So we're kind of exploring that a little bit. And then the second thing on this is TCU again, but next summer, we'll be launching a BTech camp, business technology camp for high school students, where we have them come on campus for 4 days and give them all kinds of experiences with different technologies. And we're going to be using this DCM as a way to kind of organize the material in that camp. So we're finding lots of great applications for it. And final questions or thoughts, ideas?
If you have a question and you're looking at the clock and need to run, you could always shoot me a message, research@ascm.org. That will direct to my email address. It's just easier to remember, research@ascm.org. And as you can see, Morgan and Chris have their emails up on the screen.
Yeah, I just noticed Deloitte's misspelled here, so we'll have to correct that.
Ah,
Those before
I
the
always
I.
do that. 2 L's, it's 1 L and 2 T's. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
But
So yeah, so don't paste that. I don't know where it's going to go to someone in Russia or something, probably.
yeah, 1 L, 2 T's.
Yeah,
Freudian, or I know it's not Freudian, but it's a slip there. Sorry about that.
no problem.
Okay,
right.
well, thanks again, everybody, for joining, and my good friends I see out there, Funda, Malik, you guys, thank you for joining us as well.
Yeah,
And
Everyone.
let's keep the conversation going.
And
Yeah,
we see
thank
Ben's
you.
dog now.
Ben's got his dog. Okay, great. Oh,
Yeah.
cute.
Thank you so much. And just to wrap up, all content and material included in this ASCM webinar is the property of ASCM and is protected by the United States and international copyright laws. All rights are reserved. And as I mentioned, a recording of this will be saved. We'll post it and distribute it to the attendees. So thank you so much again. Research@ascm.org if you have any further questions.
Thanks,
Well,
Matt.
thank you very much. Good
Thanks.
to see you, Morgan.
Yeah, good to see you.